So I would direct your attention to slide 5. Welcome. Our focus for the next 90 minutes is the question, what will it take to effectively release large amounts of sustained human energy towards significant social, that is, economic, political, and cultural change over the rest of this century? We're going to come at answering this question from several different directions. You'll have a chance to refine your individual thinking. Hopefully you did some brainstorming in advance. We'll spend some time in small groups sharing our ideas and clarifying them and choosing the ones to send forward. Then we'll work together to cluster those ideas into sort of our main answers and give them names. Then we'll step back and reflect a little bit if the link hasn't gone down or whatever, and off we go. This is a part of I guess you'd say our first pilot is a part of the newly named ICA Top Global Social Research Network. The rest of the century is likely to be turbulent, probably more turbulent than anything we've experienced. And a large part of how it goes seems like it's going to depend on our human response as individuals, as communities, as nations, as organizations, as institutions. Last spring, 30 of us studied a book by Duane Elgin called Choosing Earth, in which he outlines the next 50 years based on projections in 8 different areas: climate change, population, income inequality, those kinds of things, and kind of gives a name to each one of those, the decades, kind of depending on what's likely to be happening there. Watch this 4-minute video in which he kind of reflects on that picture and outlines what he describes as 3 pathways, the third of which he calls a great transition. Can you start the video, Lauren?
We have to go back to
we're back on the Zoom. Back on the Zoom. Thank you, Jan.
The first pathway is one of crash and collapse. It's a business as usual approach where we make small changes that do not upset the status quo. In making only small, gradual changes, systems unravel, and this culminates in a devastating evolutionary crash and the collapse of civilizations around the Earth. The second pathway is an authoritarian future that is empowered with artificial intelligence. Collapse is prevented, but at the cost of human freedom and creativity. A digital dictatorship controls our future. The third pathway is one of great transition. The old world is breaking down and a new world is being born. An awakening consciousness fosters a deepening relationship with all of life. We weave together a new world with a higher level of potential and purpose. This is the visual of the crash and collapse pathway. And as you'll recall, all 3 pathways have the same beginning. They start with a time of great unraveling in the 2020s, followed by a great fall, a free fall in the 2030s, and followed then by a time of great sorrow in the 2040s. There are 2 sets of arrows. The blue arrows represent the direction the planet is headed. The yellow arrows represent the movement that is emerging for transformation. You'll notice that on both the crash pathway and the authoritarian pathway, the yellow arrow at the bottom is very thin. On the great transition pathway, there are many more yellow arrows moving through the 20s and 30s. As the yellow arrows come into the time of great sorrow, they provide the uplift for a great transition. So, what are the yellow arrows that we see beginning in the 2020s? It's you and I and the rest of us working for the well being of all life. Right now, in the 20s and 30s, we are planting the seeds for the great transition. And the yellow arrows represent our growing up as a species, our awakening consciousness, our concern and care for the well-being of all life. So you see, it will require a movement on behalf of the well-being of all life if we are to realize a great transition. All three pathways are likely to continue to varying degrees. The question is, which one will guide us into the future? And which one will your actions support?
Zoom tonight. Thank you. I'll call you
Those
back.
yellow arrows, that's our human response. There are many different stories about the next 50 years, but they all come down to our question. What will it take to effectively release large amounts of sustained human energy over the next 50 years towards significant social, economic, political, and cultural change? Let's get to work. I'm turning it over to Jan.